Welcome back to the Adult Bible Study of the First Baptist Church of Ray City. My name is Charles, and I'm one of our associate pastors, and it's my privilege and honor to be able to dive into the Word of God with you today. And so today we're going to be continuing our Lifeway Explore the Bible material, where we are diving into the book of Song of Solomon, ending our series on wisdom and relationship, seeing how Song of Solomon plays out for us today. And so today we're going to be in Song of Solomon chapter 5, verse 6 through 16. Before we dive into Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 6, I want to give us a little bit of context for Solomon's Song of Songs. It is a book that outlines the redeeming and rolling back of our shame, separation, and alienation that was caused by the fall. And so we have in the Song of Songs, or the Song of Solomon, as I have here, we have this continued play of separation, alienation, a lack of intimacy that is played out through finding or searching or seeking after that intimacy, that union together, and then the bringing to union and now redemption of reconciliation from separation to having true union together. And we see that played out over and over and over again. The immediate context of our verses today gives us a little idea of what is going on here. So Song of Songs, chapter 4 to chapter 5, verse 1 is a wedding day poem. And you have this very descriptive imagery of the man describing the woman and calling to her, inviting her to open up to him so that they might consummate their marriage. They might come together unified as one. And that's ultimately what happens. They are married, and Song of Solomon 5:1 tells us, I have come to my garden, my sister, my bride. It's just poetic speak for I have been with my wife. We have consummated, brought our marriage together to show love and union, and it's the perfect ultimate picture of true intimacy within marriage, where the two, as Genesis would say, become one flesh. But then you have this odd transition to Song of Solomon, chapter 5, verse 2 through 5, which is what immediately precedes the text that we're going to be really talking about today. And what we have is we have this weird interaction with this presumed wife and husband, where she's sleeping and she hears potentially in her dreams, but regardless of whether it's in her dreams as she's sleeping or not, she hears her loved one knock at the door, and he's asking her to open the door as he professes his love for her. My darling, my dove, my perfect one. But then you have this really interesting response from the woman. So her husband, presumably right here, is asking her to open the door for him to come in for sexual union, sexual intimacy. But then her response is an odd one. I have taken off my clothing. How can I put them back on? I have washed my feet. How can I get them dirty? What we have here is we have this desire for intimacy from the husband, but yet this complete separation or alienation and aloofness and a lack of intimacy from the wife. The man tries to get in, but it's just not happening. Although during this time, her desire for him has now come. I arose to open for my love. My hand drips with myrrh, my fingers flowing with myrrh on the handle of the bolt. So she has become aroused and desires intimacy with her husband. And that brings us to where we're at in verse 6. I opened to my love, but my love had turned and gone away. My heart sank because he had left. I sought him, but did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. As we just previously saw, she had finally arisen to go and open the door for her lover to let him in so that they might be together. And when she finally does, she opens it, but he had turned and gone away. Now, we're not exactly sure, and the language is a little bit vague about why he's turned and gone away, but it appears that her aloofness, based on her questions, has driven him away and made him realize the separation and lack of desire that she has. Now, in that time period, she has obviously, her feelings were stirred up for him, but now he's turned away and he's gone. This has left her utterly broken. My heart sank because he left. Her spirit went out. Her soul failed her. Those are some other different translations of this general context of the sinking of her heart. It shows the emotional, distraught, and sickened woman over her own aloofness, her own coolness or coldness to him. And so she goes out searching for him. I sought him, but I did not find him. I called him, but he did not answer. And her search leads her into the city. Song of Solomon 5:7. The guards who go about the city found me. They beat me and wounded me. They took my cloak from me, the guardians of the walls. This is an absolutely tragic section of the poem right here. And what we find is her having opened the door, her desires are stirred for her lover. And so she's searching after him and she wants to find him. She's going out and trying to find her lover, which takes her out into the city. Similar to chapter 3, verse 1 through 4, where she goes out and then she finds him after meeting up with these guards. But in this one, the guards abuse her. The guards, instead of her finding her lover, the guards are the one who finds her, and they beat and wound me, and they took my cloak from me. A point that we want to make is about the city. The city is a location where intimacy is not capable. It's a place where union and intimacy are not, and this whole song, this Song of Songs, Solomon's greatest song, is all about intimacy and union and coming together. And so the city symbolizes the opposite of that. And so we must remember that this is a poetic dream sequence. If you remember, she was asleep, but her heart was awake, and then she heard a knock. Now, whether that was in a dream or reality, it's neither here nor there. The purpose is we should remember that this is a poem. And so it's meant to elicit emotion. And that's exactly what the verse that we're in does. And what we are to see is, as poetry, it is symbolic, showing the harshness of the city, the harshness of this urban public place, versus the private intimacy that she would have had she opened the door when her husband knocked and came calling. And so this harshness is played out through what appears to be a scene of the rape of this woman. Now, some scholars say that this is an actual event that happened. However, that appears difficult to believe, and I lean towards the commentators and scholars who don't see this as a real, actual event that has taken place. And the reason for that is she tends to get over it extremely quickly. You have this scene where she's beaten, she's wounded, and they've taken her cloak, her veil, her clothes from her, but then she immediately turns to being lovesick and asking the women of Jerusalem to help her find her love. Because of this, it doesn't appear to be an actual event, but rather to symbolize and show the harshness of what's taking place with the absence of her lover. And that is what brings us to this verse, Song of Solomon 5:8. Young women of Jerusalem, I charge you, if you find my love, tell him that I am lovesick. Again, like I stated, this verse appears to show that there's no effect for what has just previously happened. This beating and wounding that has taken place has not left any ill effects, and she's just desiring to be with her lover. And it shows the continual playing out within this song of the lover's desire, the seeking and finding of intimacy and union and desire and love between these two individuals. And so what she does is she says, I charge you, women of Jerusalem, or young women of Jerusalem. And what is her charge? Her charge is to find him and give him a message. Tell him that I am lovesick. This phrase, I charge you, is a shortened, similar phrase to Song of Solomon 2:7 and 3:5. And it literally means to promise me, or I adjure you, make this promise to me so that it will happen. Because her desire throughout all of this, through her searching, through the trouble that she's had in the city, her desire is to find the one that she loves, to find her lover, because she is lovesick from her lack of union with the one that she loves. Based on this charge, the young women have a response for her. Song of Solomon 5:9. What makes the one you love better than another, most beautiful of women? What makes him better than another, that you would give us this charge? The young women of Jerusalem ask her two questions, which basically sum up to one question. And these questions are a segue from the separation and lack of intimacy to a description from the woman of her lover, showing her affection and desire for intimacy and union. And these young women acknowledge her beauty. They call her most beautiful of women, which could be a dig at the woman who is searching for her husband, because if she's so beautiful, why is her husband leaving her? And it points back to the aloofness that we had mentioned earlier with these questions. It does not appear to me that this is a dig at the most beautiful woman. Rather, because of her pursuit, remember, she is searching after him and even deals with abuse within the city and is still overcome with love sickness. So I have a hard time believing that this is a dig, but rather just making the comment, what makes the one you love better than another? What makes him better? It boils down to, how does your lover stand out among others? The literal question in this one is, what is your lover from a lover? How is he better than all of the others? Which, as I mentioned just a second ago, is a segue, a beautiful segue from the separation that runs from 5:2 to 5:8 to the description that she is about to give of her affection and love for her lover. Song of Solomon 5:10 through 12. My love is fit and strong, notable among 10,000. His head is purest gold, his hair is wavy and black as a raven, his eyes are like doves beside flowing streams washed in milk, set like jewels. Our woman starts on her discourse, her descriptive poem of her affection and love and description of her lover. And she starts out with a phrase that just points to her affection for him. My love is fit and strong. It's interesting that the CSB translates this as fit and strong. The ESV says that this is radiant and this is ruddy, which points to the complexion. Radiant gives off the idea of a glow, and ruddy means red. The combination of these two ideas probably points to the emphasis of a healthy complexion, because he has a glow about him, which makes him notable or noticeable among 10,000 men. And most likely this is just an idiom, which means he is like no other. And then she works from top to bottom. She works from his head to his feet in this descriptive poem, which forms, interestingly, a chiastic pair with the husband's description of the woman, where he goes from her feet up to her head. in Song of Solomon 7, 1 through 5. His head is purest gold. This could be a reference to godlike appearance, a noble appearance, or a golden tan. I personally tend to lean towards the godlike appearance, not giving the reference to the idol, but as we go through this poem, we're going to see a lot of imagery that has to do with holy places. There's going to be temple-like imagery in here, and so we're going to see an elevating and a making highly of this man, which points to the holiness and the exaltation of the person who she is describing here. From his head, she moves to his hair, which is wavy. And that word is actually a very interesting word. It's the only time that that word is used in all of the Old Testament and really all of the Bible. And it means palm branches or date clusters. Hebrew documents from Old Testament time period uses this word and refers to curly hair. And so she could be describing his curly hair, but either way, she's talking about his hair, and she's saying that it's wavy or like palm branches, which could have a reference to flowing, and it's black as a raven. Ravens are known for their deep black color, and so she's talking about his head, purest gold, his hair, wavy and black, and now his eyes like doves. And doves is a really interesting description because doves physically don't actually have that appealing of an appearance. And so it's hard to tell why doves is used a number of times throughout Song of Solomon to reference beauty within one's eyes. It's most likely, though, referring to the soft and gentle nature of doves, or to the purity that doves typically symbolized. And then we come to another odd phrase, washed in milk. This is just a peculiar phrase. It's odd. Some commentators believe that maybe the word teeth should be set right here, but that doesn't appear necessarily to have a strong case for it. And I tend to lean towards the fact that this is how it's been handed down, and so this is how I would take it. And I think that when we take extended metaphor as a whole, beside flowing streams, washed in milk, set like jewels, which is actually interesting because jewels here means pools, like pools of water. And so it's interesting that, again, the CSB chose to word that as jewels, but we have to remember Song of Solomon is so symbolic, so hard with the words and the way that they formulated them to give a complete 100 accurate depiction of what it looks like in the English language because it was written in Hebrew. So I think that we can give the writers of the CSB tons of credit. They've done a beautiful job with this. Those are just some things that I have noticed as I've gone through and studied and read commentaries. But the ultimate point with this whole extended metaphor is that the eyes of this man, of her love, glisten. They have a way about them where they just stand out. And so her love has a radiant appearance physically with his complexion. He's like no other. He's beset with royalty or nobility. His hair is wavy and black, and his eyes, they shine like none other. And the description continues. Song of Solomon 5:13 through 16. His cheeks are like beds of spice, mounds of perfume. His lips are lilies, dripping with flowing myrrh. His arms are rods of gold set with brill. His body is an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli. His legs are alabaster pillars set on pedestals of pure gold. His presence is like Lebanon, as majestic as the cedars. His mouth is sweetness. He is absolutely desirable. This is my love, and this is my friend, young women of Jerusalem. As we've already made note, she's working down his body, and so she starts with his head, then she goes to his hair, then she goes to his eyes, and now she comes to his cheeks. And they are like beds of spices, mounds of perfume. What's interesting is the phrase his cheeks actually probably refers to his beard, because in Israel, Levitical law prohibited the clipping of the beard. We also see throughout the history of Israel that it's shameful to have trimmed your beard. most likely his cheeks is actually a reference to the beard of her lover. And what's really interesting, and I think presses for the point of intimacy and relationship, is that the way she describes his beard doesn't have to do with the physical outward appearance, but rather she says it's a bed of spices and mounds of perfume. Those are scent-oriented or olfactory-oriented senses, which mean what she's doing is she's smelling his beard. She's talking about the scent or the smell of his beard, which has to be close up. You can't smell someone's beard without being close to them. And I think that it points to the intimacy that they share and the intimacy that they desire. And then it goes on with the sensual description of the lips. His lips are lilies, dripping with flowing myrrh. If you've read through the Song of Solomon, it's interesting that his lips are dripping with flowing myrrh because her lips drip with honey from chapter 4, verse 11. And the reference to lilies probably speaks of the softness. And so what she's trying to say is she's saying that his beard smells good, his lips are soft, and they have a sweet smell and presence about them. And then she continues this downward trajectory of talking about her lover, and she goes with his arms. His arms are rods of gold set with brill. This is very interesting language because to speak of his arms as rods of gold set with brill is actually sounds more like the Near East idol worship. Idols within a temple would have been set in this kind of way, but I think what's happening is she's not necessarily talking about this godlike individual, but raising her affection and him up to this godlike level because of the intense love that they have for one another. And I think that's played out even more with the next description. His body is an ivory panel covered with lapis lazuli. He is beset with jewels and gems, and he's smooth as an ivory panel set with gold. He is like a god. Not only that, but then you continue down, his legs are alabaster pillars set on a pedestal of pure gold. If we remember, to be holy is to be set apart. And so she is really just trying to set apart, show the holiness of the love that she has for her lover. But really what we should see is we should see the intimacy here. We should see the desire and affection that she has for her lover. His presence is like Lebanon. Lebanon is a beautiful place beset with hills and mountains and forests that are known for their beauty and grandeur. And the most beautiful among that of Lebanon are the cedars, which are the most fragrant of all trees, or at least one of the more fragrant of all the trees. And so what we have here is we have very temple, holy looking individual. It's very holy, set apart kind of language, and she's trying to point us to her true love. And she ends with talking about his mouth and the sweetness of his mouth, her desire for embrace and her desire for intimacy and union together. This could be talking about his speech and his being sweet and loving, but based on the fact that this is a love poem, which has erotic language all throughout, talking about how their desire is for sexual union and intimacy, most likely his mouth is sweet is just saying that she wants to kiss him. And he is absolutely desirable. This is my love. This is my friend. Young women of Jerusalem. Her desire is to be with and be unified, being two persons brought together as one flesh. That's her desire, her love. And so we should see this as a drive towards intimacy. That there was separation, there was abuse and beating and separation where she was having to search after him. And what will ultimately happen at the end of this poem, which goes through chapter 6, verse 3, is that they will be back together and be unified together in love because of the rolling back and the taking away of what happened at the fall, which is that separation, alienation, and lack of intimacy, to having intimacy and union and love for one another.
Welcome to the question and answer time. My name is Summer, I'm Pastor Charles's wife, and I was really grateful to just have the conclusion to the study where I really appreciated you walking us through the beginning all the way to the end, giving us a broad context. And I did learn a lot. You asked if I learned anything, and I learned a lot by just the imagery that you went into, some of the words that you expounded on. So thanks for taking the time to dig in. And I do want to mention that I noticed the point that you made about the beards. Duly noted that beards were appreciated then and now.
They were appreciated.
I'm sure, yeah. So I just wanted to get your thoughts on, there has been in our society, but also globally, just a breakdown in the marriage structure. And something that you don't see often is husbands publicly telling how much they love their wife and vice versa. I even love the part at the end where it talked about my friend. You know, they were describing each other, and then it ends with, you know, they're lovers, but they're also friends. What would you say to someone that might be watching and their marriage is struggling and they're wondering what they can do? Personally, you can't control your spouse. You can't control society and the false images that society paints. But individually, how would you encourage someone if their marriage is bumpy? What would you say to do in light of Song of Solomon?
I would say that the biggest thing that we can do is fight against the natural separation that happens between us. As people, we want what we want. We don't naturally think of the good of the other person. I mean, yes, we can do that, but it's not the most natural thing. The most natural thing for us to do is to think of our desires first. But you see throughout Song of Solomon this running away from the separation and to union together. And what I have seen in our marriage, what I've seen in other people's marriage, is when the breakdown happens is when there's not union together. And that doesn't have to be sexual union. That's just talking in union, like we're having a conversation. We're talking about the deeper things and not just, you know, about family and about sports and about whatever, you know, you might want to talk about or I want to talk about, but getting to the deeper things of how you're truly doing. And I would say that's what Song of Solomon does is, I mean, it uses erotic sexual language throughout it, but really what's the point? The point is that they desire to be together and they desire union together. And it goes deeper than just sexual union. It is intimacy to the truest and purest form, which is intimacy in the fact that two become one flesh, unified in marriage.
I've never thought about this until this moment, but pre-fall, you have they're naked and not ashamed, and then post-fall, you have they're ashamed. What's the difference? A part of it, not all of it, of course, but a part of it is when we're ashamed, we're looking at ourselves. We're self-focused. And I think so much in marriage could be helped, of course, by communication and being other-focused.
Yeah.
The times I feel like we struggle is when we're caught up in whatever we're struggling with, instead of even just being friends and communicating and walking together.
Yeah. Marriage doesn't typically start out as two people who hate each other and are just physically attracted. Like usually there's something that is there as far as a friendship and a union together. And what we don't do is we don't foster that well because we start living our separate lives. And my challenge to you who are watching, and my challenge to us is that we not live separate lives, but we enjoy the union that God has brought us together in, that friendship.
Yeah.
And so that's what I challenge you with today as well, and thank you for tuning in to the Adult Bible Study. It's been such a pleasure to be able to continue to do this, and we will continue to do this until I don't know when, but we are excited to continue, and we look forward to doing this again with you next week.